everybody, David the AI Guide here. Welcome to episode 100. We're almost at a year, not quite, of doing these videos. And we're doing it all for you guys, for our subscribers, but especially for the younger people who are going to be very heavily impacted work-wise by AI in the next 10 years. So our mission is to guide you and give you resources and help protect you from the AI tsunami that is on the way and has already started to arrive in some sectors. Tonight we're going to talk about batteries. Why? Because batteries going forward are going to be an integral part of life, key to many of the things that we enjoy in modern societies here in the US, but also batteries are going to be very key to further development of Africa and parts of Asia that are still developing. So there's a revolution going on in battery storage technology, and there's a bunch of different battery types that are being developed and will be introduced. The main one right now is lithium-ion batteries. And what's happening with those, because those are going to be the most logical thing to power vehicles and to hold power for our homes. Well, lithium-ion batteries are following the standard dematerialization cost curve that we see in an exponential environment. So what does that mean? That means that battery costs are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. I'll give you a parallel example. If you go back 20 years ago, solar power generation, because the panels were so expensive, was useless without very high government subsidies. No one would have been using solar panels 20 years ago unless some governments were already heavily subsidizing them. And governments have continued to subsidize solar panels over the last 20 years. What was the result of that government investment in the solar panel industry? Well, solar is now cheaper than nuclear, it's cheaper than coal, it's cheaper than natural gas, it's cheaper to make power using solar than any other major current generation form. And the proof of that is that coal generating capacity has fallen by 75% in the last 20 years. So 20 years ago, most power was generated by coal, at least in the developed countries in Asia, North America, and Europe, and so forth. But solar power kept getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and it has now virtually completely displaced coal-generated power, along with wind power. Of course, wind power and the same cost curve in wind turbines of getting cheaper, cheaper, cheaper has also affected coal, and even now is cheaper than natural gas usually is, which is stunning. No one would have foreseen that 20 years ago. And nuclear is super expensive because of the cost to build a nuclear power plant. Billions of dollars. Like, I think a current nuclear power plant costs about $10 billion to build. This is astronomical money. So that doesn't make sense either. Now, the reason I just talked about solar, wind, is because batteries are following that same parallel. They're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And the forecast is by 2025 that electric powered vehicles will actually be cheaper to make and cheaper to buy than gasoline and diesel powered. Diesel's probably already on the edge, but even gasoline powered. So that means that by 2030, people aren't going to be buying gasoline powered vehicles because they're more expensive, and the pollution, and there probably will be real disincentives in terms of the government to buying vehicles like that are heavily polluting by then. All of this change of technology in solar, wind, and batteries has a parallel benefit of making the air cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. I can tell you that the air is dramatically cleaner now than in the 70s. How do I know that? Because I was growing up then, and I know the air is way cleaner now than it was then, even in heavily polluted areas like the LA basin and so forth. It's much clearer than it was back in the 70s. So this displacement of old technologies in parallel is going to give us a cleaner world to live in, which is a very nice benefit. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is what does battery power and battery storage of energy and releasing energy from batteries and solar panels and wind generation all have in common now and even more in the future? It's AI. AI is going to be the centerpiece of all these technologies by managing the loads that are generated and stored and releasing those loads during peak periods, which is normally the evening when everyone gets home from work, wherever you live. From 5 to 10 p.m. is the high power usage. Well, the sun is down and there may not be wind, but if there's stored power, there's no problem. So AI is the enabler of making all of these technologies work properly. AI enables storage of power, AI enables distribution of power, AI enables generation of power, and it will get much, much more so coming up, because we've talked about how the grid is going to completely change from a centralized, huge power plant generation structure with power being distributed long distances to power being generated locally and stored locally and used locally. This is a complete change in the grid. So, by the way, this will make the grid much, much more reliable. For those of you people who live in Texas, what just happened will not happen in this new structure. It will not. Now, governments, state governments and federal governments could interfere with this and delay the rollout of these technologies, but it won't really make economic sense to do that. It will be cheaper. So there is the logic for rolling this out as fast as possible. Now, what is this going to do? Well, it's going to change the way and change careers that the grid system is managed and maintained. So it's going to cause folks who work in electricity generation, distribution, and management to be even more at a higher level than they are. Why? Because they're going to have to know AI along with knowing electricity and electricity storage and generation. So this is raising up the skill set of these workers over the next 10 years. AI is like everything else. There's good things and bad things to it. There is going to be significant job loss, but there's also going to be new jobs that haven't even been thought of yet, and for people who will not lose a job, their skill set will become much more sophisticated over the next 10 to 20 years. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for staying tuned for 100 videos. I really appreciate it. And we're just getting ready to launch the first resources to help you find AI-safe careers. So stay tuned for that very, very shortly. Thanks a lot. Take care. Please like, subscribe, share, and God bless all of you. Take care. Bye.